Welcome to In the Green Chair, an interview podcast series for people looking to begin or expand their career in the green economy. I'm your host, Anna Garza, and today's guest in the Green Chair is Civil and Water Resources Engineer Victor Doe.
I'm lucky to be doing and enjoying what I'd like to do. We see in the news every day talking about different roads, traffic, transit, that I'm constantly reminded of it. I can't even go for a walk outside of my neighborhood without thinking about how water drains in certain areas. It's awful. It's a gift and a curse at the same time, but because I enjoy it, it doesn't seem like it's work.
In this episode, we discuss Victor's career journey as an environmental engineer. We learn about water resources and stormwater management, and we talk about how engineers are tackling environmental issues. Welcome to the Green Chair, Victor. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited for this.
I want to start off with asking you, what led you to pursuing a green job?
When I was learning about this in middle school, this was however long ago, it's like talking about climate change was sort of like a touch into the world of what it is today and how much we see it everywhere. But then I knew that I've always had a sort of interest in like weather. So it kind of branched off with that. So it kind of already aligns itself with like say a green job or those types of natural physical sciences that had a lot of interest in, and then it just bloomed into, hey, let's just do engineering, and here I am now, many years later.
And so you specialize in water resources and stormwater management. What are the main job duties and responsibilities of a water resource specialist?
Oh man, it goes very big. So ultimately, in the end, the job is you got to get water from point A to point B, but just simply put, that we want to be able to get the water to mimic the natural environment of where it would normally flow. Because say that you have a lot of rainwater falling on asphalt or hard surface, and then it just ends up collecting a lot more than if it were to hit grass. So part of my job, there's many things I do, but one of the most simplest things I can break down is coming up with some sort of stormwater management plan. You need to look at what we'd call a drainage area or your watershed, and then we can break those down into subcatchments. So say like our big watershed right here in Toronto, we have many ones. So most of whatever around here would drain to Lake Ontario, and then even within it, like looking at project specific areas, you can really break down, okay, this amount of water is going to go to this spot. For example, saying working on a road project, I would, okay, all this water is going to go to this catch basin, and then this catch basin is going to go to this manhole connected to this sewer.
And you have to take into account a lot of project management skills too, I can assume.
Oh yeah, for sure. So that's the design side, and then there's a whole project management side, doing like budgeting, scheduling, coordinating, talking to different stakeholders, as I've mentioned. But I like to stay on the design side sort of things because I like to nerd out and geek out in my models and look at all my data.
And you studied environmental engineering. Can you tell me what kind of jobs that degree prepares graduates for?
Oh, there's just like so many jobs. It's not necessarily that you need to go into engineering, but the amount of skills that you learn from it. Uh, for me, I went right into teaching to get a Bachelor of Education degree because I was like, I think I've always sort of liked teaching, but now I know engineering taught me this set of skills, but it didn't teach me the teacher side of skills. Generally, yes, you can go into your engineering jobs, but there are a lot of transferable skills that you can take into other industries. I've seen people go into finance with it. People have gone into the medical field with it. But I think with just what environmental engineering is, and then it could just go into so many other things. I just picked one thing because I like working with water and understanding that side, and that sort of relates to a lot of general interests that I like. But I find that if you're bored in one thing, you can switch to another. But it's kind of a tricky balance to do that when you're much further along in your career than to jump back. But with uh, with a lot of places looking for people to do work, I would say it's a lot easier to do that now, to jump into a different field within engineering than if it was, say, 10 years ago. But just, a lot of the jobs, I think the skills and the quality of people that come out of an engineering degree, having that education, I think it just sort of you're able to do most jobs that you want to do if you put your mind to it.
And it's a wide profession too. I know that you also decided later to specialize in civil engineering. So, what advice would you give young people about choosing their studies?
My advice is that you don't need to get it right the first time, and it's okay to switch majors. If you find something that interests your everyday life, being like if just an example, say that you studied mechanical engineering and that you really enjoy just solar panels, right? You can align yourself with that sort of industry and be like, hey, this is what I want to do, and that you'll get to that point and hopefully have a very rewarding career in that.
Yeah, and it's okay to, like you said, not get it right the first time. The important
Hmm.
part is having that kind of open outlook to be able to try new things. And and I know that besides water resources and storm water management, you've worked on creating plans for Ontario's Ministry of Transportation and the Metrolinx Transit and Rail project. For listeners who are outside of the GTA, Greater Toronto Area, can you tell me more about the Metrolinx project and your involvement in it?
Just as a crash course for those who do not know Metrolinx, they are what they call an arm's length provincial agency body, whatever you want to call it, that is responsible for a lot of the interregion transit. So just jumping from one little town city to another, and that ultimately most of the routes end up at Union Station in Toronto. So Union Station in a lot of cities is sort of like the central hub
Mhm.
of where a lot of the transit comes together. My first exposure in my engineering job was a big Metrolinx project, and it's still undergoing. It was the electrification project, where currently the trains run on diesel, and
Mm.
that they want to electrify all the corridors, not everything. It's super complicated because they don't own all the right of ways throughout the region. But the team of us were responsible for looking at the utilities and finding old records and contacting to utility companies and being like, "Hey, do you have this thing here? Can you confirm it? Do you have a drawing?" And then we put a bunch of other information there. So if their utilities conflicting with the rail, you kind of got to start that work early because
Mm.
there's
Okay.
thousands and thousands of utilities just running across and along with the different rail corridors. Hmm.
What barriers and environmental challenges have you come across the Metrolinx project?
I think these projects, they just take a lot of time, right? The
Yeah.
timelines for these can be really long when we compare it to many other countries and regions where they can get things approved and done a lot quicker. I've found that Ontario as a whole, we have a lot of red tape that we
Mm.
need to get through. And for example, some neighborhoods being like, hey, we didn't hear anything about this, and you want to build this thing here. Why weren't we consulted? That's not in my realm of what I've dealt with. That's more like the planning and policy side. But I think that there's it's it's a tricky balance because like we need this infrastructure built. We want to bring this many people into the city and have this sort of growth, but there's a trade-off that we're going to need to sacrifice. And I know some people may disagree with that or agree with it, but this is the position that we're put in now in the city.
Because our podcast focuses on highlighting green jobs that help the planet, in what ways does your job help society?
uh I would like to say that just like a lot of what we do is sort of the backbone of getting a city to run properly and all this infrastructure that's needed. Uh, I think I mentioned to you before saying that we were sort of the not recognized essential frontline workers that aren't doing like the work right up front, but we are kind of behind the scenes being like, okay, we're doing these replacements to the roads and pipes under the roads, doing this reconstruction of roads to help you get from point A to B, not just them, but like all the emergency services and whatnot. I think on a whole, it's because we're designated as like a professional sort of body. You gotta write there's an ethics exam that we need to write, and you need to get 4 years of experience, and 1 year of them has to be under a professional engineer. So I myself became a professional engineer last July, and that sort of gives me a lot of extra power now and feeling really good about what I do and the work that I'm doing. I haven't stamped or signed off any drawings yet. That's going to be coming soon. But I
No, but
think that,
congratulations.
no, thank you so much. It was a very long road to get there, and I didn't think I would get it because I was jumping. I taught in England, and then I came back because I'm like, do I want to keep teaching, or do I want to give this engineering thing a try? And I think many of the engineers together, many of them you'd find, say, around municipalities or different, say, City of Toronto, or working in different private engineering firms, that we are all ultimately getting the same goal of helping the city run and grow for whatever it needs to do with the millions of people that we want to bring in, not just here, but everywhere across the country. So there's lots of different remote areas that we could be doing projects in as well.
Yeah, and just as a quick background info for our listeners, before working as a civil engineer, as you mentioned, you obtained your Bachelor of Education and worked as a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math teacher in the UK. Can you, since we're on the topic already, can you share with us a little bit about what your work as a teacher was like?
Oh man, it was a lot of hard work. It didn't break me, but if you hear a lot of stories of people going to the UK to teach, it's quite different than what it would be teaching at, say, a school board in Ontario. It was a big growing up experience for me too, right? It's an opportunity for you to be in a world-class city like I was in London, and that you get to be able to travel so easily and see so many different things. There's trade-offs, and I wasn't making the best money there. It was quite awful actually. They get severely underpaid, but it's an experience that I wouldn't trade for anything.
It's a
And I would
personal experience.
yeah, it's a personal, it was sort of my coming of age too in my 20s, because I did 6 years of school, university, and then went right there. And I didn't really have any adult maturing time in Canada. So I kind of did that there in the UK. And then I did that again when I moved back here, because like you're out of school, you're working an adult job, you're getting a salary, and the game just completely changes there, and you really get to call your own shots and navigate your life at that point.
And indirectly, it helped you realize that you want to give that engineering side that shot. So
Yeah, and make a lot more money and have job security.
we'll be right back. This interview series is part of the Green Collar Careers program, brought to you by Relay Education. Relay is a Canadian charity that delivers renewable energy, environmental education, and green careers programs for youth. Remember to check out our website, relayeducation.com, and social media channels at Relay Education to find out when our next interview will be posted and to find resources on how to start your green career. And so, back on the topic of environmental issues, what is one? I know rural and urban areas alike are facing and will continue to face many environmental issues due to the changes in our climate. So, what is one environmental issue that will require attention in the coming years, and what role do environmental engineers play in helping address it?
As you pointed out, climate change is going to be the biggest one, because I'll use the example of the city of Toronto. A lot of the pipes and infrastructure is aging. It's really old. In the downtown core, you see a lot of stuff exploding, like, for lack of a better expression, like water coming out of the ground. If it's overdeveloped, there's just too much water coming up from way higher up in the watershed, say like the York region area, that they didn't think about decades ago, and now they're really trying to mitigate those problems. So there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be replaced, and there's a lot of people that are going to move to the city. So this is sort of, I don't know the expression to say it, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to get built before people come into the city. I know they want to keep bringing up all these condos and stuff downtown, but if they're getting built up in areas where you kind of see a lot of road flooding and just not the biggest of storms, just like, say, like, a couple hours of moderate rain and then you'll see flooding. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, because urban sprawl is a problem on its own, and then making sure that, like you said, the infrastructure is built at a fast enough pace to deal with
Hmm.
that. And it's easy to kind of neglect it because if you're not seeing all the pipes or all the underground infrastructure in the city of Toronto or in any city, it's easier to kind of like not focus on that issue
Not
or
think about
not
it. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
not think about it.
it's easy to see it when like manhole cover comes off and explodes and you see water shooting up like a geyser. Be like, that's not supposed to happen, is it?
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's kind of like your job. Like in COVID, it was kind of in the background, and
Yeah.
it's the same thing with the issues, but they're still looming. So it's important to highlight your kind of job and the jobs that deal with this. So
Hmm.
you told me also about your job is that it's the work that you do is a traditional line of work. What did you mean by that?
What I'd like to say that it's the traditional line of work being like it's jobs that have been around for decades. That it's not new jobs that have been created because of a digital world. I just say like YouTube people. I know that's a very easy one to jump to because they did surveys and stuff for younger kids. What do you want to be when you want to grow up? Oh, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be an influencer. But
Oh man.
I know, I know we're laughing about it, but I think that sort of traditional line of work is what it's still the backbone of what a society needs to run.
I know that you have changed your job. You've changed jobs in the last 2 years due to COVID. Can you share what that's been like, switching jobs around?
Oh, it was through the path of an engineer. I was saying, while becoming an engineer, you can't call yourself an engineer until you get the proper certification because it is illegal to do so and they can give you a slap on the wrist. Uh, I was just approaching, I'm trying to do the math in my head, almost the fourth year of my experience when I did my first job jump. And this was in August of 2020. And, I saw another good opportunity, and it was still quite early on in the pandemic where it was a big gamble to do it. And it wasn't as, say, lucrative as it is now to try to be jumping jobs. But it was quite it was quite nerve-wracking at the time trying to talk to other people, get an opinion, and then ultimately having that talk with my manager and having them being understanding. Because I think the best thing that you can find is like a manager who is understanding of that sort of thing and wants your best interest along with balancing, the interest of the company, being like, hey, just let them go, let them have this experience and then still stay connected. Because in the civil engineering world, and I'm sure in many other industries in just the city, it's small, right? So you got to maintain these relationships. You can't burn any bridges and have things go nasty because people talk, right? The best way to find the job, uh, how I found every single job is through someone I know and through word of mouth. They can be like, hey, do you know this guy? What's he like? Have you worked with him? Do you know anything? I've changed jobs one more time, which was
Hmm.
at the beginning of this year. And that one was a whole other daunting experience of being like, okay, changing a job again in the pandemic. I didn't want it to happen, but I was sort of put in a position being I didn't want to wait for, can things get better here? Because I sort of a go-getter in that sense, being like, okay, I got to call the shots myself and really take control and be like, I wanted this, so I'm going to go for it. And here I am now.
So you brought up worker shortages again. Can
Mhm.
you tell me about the worker shortages that you have been seeing and why it's important to talk about it?
The pandemic's completely changed the game, being like, do I want to be doing this? There's something else that I could be doing. Maybe I could just say forget it all and just hide away in Costa Rica or something. I'm lucky to be doing and enjoying what I'd like to do because it's sort of an everyday life everyday life thing we see in the news every day, talking about different roads, traffic, transit, that I'm constantly reminded of it. I can't even go for a walk outside of my neighborhood without thinking about how water drains in certain areas. It's awful. It's a gift and a curse at the same time, but because I enjoy it, it doesn't seem like it's work.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Your job is so intertwined with daily life. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that is?
It's it's as a brought up, it's just how we run a city,
Hmm.
whether we have roads or transit or just sidewalks and things that we need to build. It's constantly everywhere around us. When you get to do that professionally and get paid well to do that, it's not going to be perfect everything that you like because you can't unless you're your own consultant picking and choosing the jobs that you want to do. It's pretty awesome to be able to get paid and think about this and then doing research and be like, okay, as earlier mentioned, oh,
Hmm.
yeah, I liked weather and stuff. I did want to be a weatherman at one point, but now I need to look up this data, which is some of the same data that weather people would look at and be like, hey, I'm I'm still fulfilling that background interest that I had.
Yeah, and because more often than not, career paths aren't linear. They tend to zigzag a lot. So, what advice would you give our listeners about switching careers?
I switched careers and I feel like I've switched multiple times, going from engineering education to like teaching or to getting going to teachers college and then teaching abroad and then coming back and doing engineering and say that I can even switch again and become a teacher again if I want to. But I don't think I would be a classroom teacher again. The advice that I'd sort of give is that you really got to have conversations and connect and network with people who are in that industry that you're thinking of going to. uh, for me on my LinkedIn, which people are more than welcome to add me. We can talk about that after that. I keep a collection of different groups of people, whether they're in finance, whether they were education recruiters that were approaching me before, engineering professionals, other friends that I've accumulated over the years. Everyone works in something different.
And having that wide network, not just like specifically in your field, but maybe having networks of outside your field will also help you be more well-rounded and teach you more about your field. So,
Yeah, because it's hard to do a lot of that cold calling,
yeah.
right? It's easier to know someone somewhere doing something because you never know. The worst they can say is no,
Exactly.
and then they can unfriend you or
Yeah, my
not.
favorite saying is if you don't ask, you don't get. So,
Yeah.
just don't be the one who gives yourself the no. Is there anything else that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is thinking about the future that you want and trying to be a part of that change in whatever way that you can. And I knew that when I was becoming a teacher, it's because I kind of wanted to see that we all like it, that instant gratification, right? Somebody understanding something and then you get that aha moment. It's important that we think about, okay, I have this big picture and understanding of how I want to see the world and that you align yourself in that way to really enact and manifest. You can be all worked about one thing and then it will just always work out. It's you just got to have that mindset.
So, how can people connect with you and find out more about the work that you do?
Uh, I should be actually making my own professional website. I know, like for engineering
Stay tuned.
professionals, it's not really a thing. No, no. Like, there's only so much work and stuff I can disclose of what I've done. That's why I've been careful of my wording here. I just want to say disclaimer. I know it's at the end, but just any of the views in this podcast are my own and don't represent any of my current or previous employers, and that if there are any issues about anything that I've said, then it just comes back to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that's sort of the best way. And if the and I like to do actually a lot of chats or on the phone or video call with people, as I was saying, to help them uh, through this sort of career process.
Well, thanks again for joining us today, Victor, and for the great conversations.
No, thank you so much, Anna.
Thanks for sitting down with us in the green chair today. Once again, I'm your host, Anna Garza, and stay tuned for our next episode to learn more about the different paths people take to working in the green economy.